Welcome to Topic Discuss, where you give me a topic and then we discuss it. We will discuss a wide range of topics from religion to science to spirituality to social justice issues and all the way to fun episodes like Teletubbies and Sasquatch. So if you're looking for something to lay back, listen, enjoy, and relax, this is the podcast for you. Welcome to Topic Discuss. Buckle up, buttercups.
I guess I'm wondering, I have felt, I have felt, since, and I'll just be blunt. I'm sure I don't mean for this to be a political podcast, but since the 2016 election, it just seems like division in ways I had never really seen before, came to light. Like I've been, in our community for a very long time, for example, and never have I seen, high school kids with big, giant, "Make America Great Again" flags and Trump flags from the back of their trucks, and an American flag and a Confederate flag, with doubling down. And I don't know what they're even saying is great, but I don't know if it's just you. I think you said earlier that maybe we find division where there is none, and
Yeah,
so
yeah. I think we make it. So, like my perspective has definitely evolved as I continue to grow older and continue to learn more. I think, I think from a personal viewpoint, there's a division has always been great. My my both of my grandparents served in the war to end all wars. Right. It was 1946. Um, Like that was a super. He want a very very divisive time period. My my grandmother is in Scotland, leaves Scotland, and like as we learn as I learned more about her stories and the view on the world and the view on the outlook, and kind of how the war really changed so much of everyone's view on right, wrong, incorrect, correct. I feel like that perspective, it's likely always been around. And I don't think in my lifetime, my short lifetime, like I've experienced what I think like my grandparents did in terms of huge divide and huge division. Right now might be the closest thing that I have to it. Um, but I think
but
all
nothing
things,
like that. You're right.
yeah, yeah.
I mean, so she was in Scotland during World War II.
Yeah, Scotland during World War II. My grandfather was in the Australian Navy, and he served on the ships and they looking for U-boats. Pretty wild stuff.
So you mean German U-boats?
Yeah,
That's the thing that I think is so fascinating about just everything happening right now is I wonder how many people, I'm talking about these high school kids or even people our age or younger what would they even think about or know about World War II?
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
I mean, if I watched a documentary recently about, the medical experiments that the Nazis were doing on Jews and the disabled people and twins. They were injecting them with different, unwilling patients, injecting them with infections to see which antibiotics were the most effective. They were clinical
Yeah,
trials, but inflicted disease and forced.
yeah, bonkers stuff.
Yeah. Nothing. I mean, that's not at all what we're talking about now. Well, people don't want to wear masks. That's what we're dealing
That's
with.
right. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're absolutely right. And I have I have some empathy towards who like we like towards like under 26. I feel like I had a mushy brain until I was probably like 30, and didn't comprehend and didn't understand things very well. Even as an adult, you reach 18 and like magically you're supposed to be mature. Magically, you're supposed to gain a lot of insight in your view on um, what's right, what's wrong, like behavior is supposed to change when you reach this magical age of 18. And for me, that definitely wasn't the case. I
And
felt
that
like
doesn't, yeah.
I have a little bit more sympathy, or rather, I empathize with not fully understanding. Not that I do. It's not the what I'm trying to. I'm not trying to make a case that I understand things well now, but I definitely understand things a lot better now than I did 10 years ago. I think that's probably true for most people.
So I want to double click on that for a second, because you said that I mean, science does show that our frontal lobes of our brains are not really fully, the neurons aren't really fully formed until we're 25, 26. But you had very, it feels like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but pretty mature, kind of experiences early in your life. You were traveling the country in a band, and and selling or expanding your business, and so you
Yeah,
felt like you were still
yeah,
mushy in your brain
yeah.
despite
Still,
those experiences across the
yeah,
country.
yeah. Still mushy. So I think in my late teens, early 20s, I had really unique opportunities to do quite a bit of traveling domestically and see a lot of, um, take time to go and see a lot of history, meet a lot of people, and just be involved. And that was mainly through the network of growing a business and doing a lot of trade shows. I think when I did my official count, I spent 92 weeks on the road from uh, 19 to about 24. So
92 weeks.
yeah, it was a lot. It was a lot. It was great though. It really molds your perspective of people, and it really changes the view of having uh, people just aren't like, it's not a monolith, right? Like you go and you visit the South and it's different. You go and visit the East Coast and it's different. You go and visit the Midwest and it's different. You go visit the Pacific Northwest and it's different. The West is different. So like you can really find so many different traits and different attitudes simply through geography. And that was a really interesting view. Uh, and I feel like it taught me a lot in terms of my ideas are definitely not always right, and to understand how other people are living their lives and
Do you
what's important to them.
do you have an example? I think this is exactly the kind of thing that I want to kind of tease out with people, where you've explained these experiences that kind of moved you away from tribalism, I guess,
Mm.
in a sense. Do you have an example where, as a 19, 20, 21 year old traveling and getting exposed to different people, that really stands out in your mind, that was profound for you?
Yeah, off the cuff, I'd say um, I visited Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, a few times, and that's Amish country. And I stayed in a bed and breakfast, and it was really something that was really neat to me was like you go, you fly into the Harrisburg airport, you pick up your rental car, drive to your destination, and there's horse and buggies on the road, and there's all these farms all over the place, and this extremely industrious populace that exists within a bustling area. It's a modernized city. It has all the infrastructure, and I'm staying, and I go and stay in the bed and breakfast, and in the morning we look out the great window and we can see all the farmers working. And it was profound to me because I couldn't imagine, like, I get anxiety if I don't have my cell phone. If I leave the house without my cell phone, I'm like, oh no, the world's going to come to an end. Like, what happens if I miss my notification? And yet, this extremely industrious group of people are able to be fine without all these modern joys that we have. They're still in a horse and buggy. So it was. I feel like it was a reflective moment to me to think, oh, a lot of these things, they're just first world problems for me. Like,
Yeah.
you can get by on so little, as long as you have a good community. As long as as long as you're supported from your community, whether that's your friends or your family or your network or your group. I think that's what I took from it.
So as you kind of talk about that experience, it reminds me of a conversation we've had before where you talked about being present and what that means for different people. That kind of means different things. I'm curious about what that means to you and how you apply that.
Yeah, I think the way that I define it for me, being present for me, I think I can decompose that into a few scenarios, but I'd say being present is being slow to anger, which is something that I'd love to be able to achieve, kind of this level where you're able to understand a situation, think about the contingencies, think about the impact before you react to the situation. And it's also about like recognizing where you are in the universe and being able to, like, if we're just trying our hardest, if we're trying our best, like that's for me, that's fulfilling my purpose. That's fulfilling my higher level, my goal. So if I can be present in the moment and understand, like, what am I doing in the moment, making decisions here in the moment, that's really going to affect my projection, my course, and not getting lost in the what ifs or not getting lost in the what aboutisms. It's really just emphasizing the now and understanding it and how do I fit in this and how can I make the best experience of it. I feel like that's the ultimate goal that I'm trying to work towards.
So what is the now for you? Right. And right now, like the now and how you see yourself fitting into this current present time.
Yeah, the now for me is typically it's an aversion to fringe, or it's an aversion to, like, concrete fundamentalism right now.
So say that one more time. That's interesting.
Yeah. It's an
aversion
it's an
to
aversion to the fringe, or it's an aversion to concrete fundamentalism. For me, I have a lot more personal peace if I'm more in the center instead of on either end of a specific spectrum, right? Be it a political spectrum that's kind of like the lowest hanging fruit to talk about.
That's interesting because I never or I hadn't thought about or connecting presentism or being present with an aversion to fundamentalism. I think that's very fascinating. Concrete fundamentalism is, I think, what you had said.
Concrete fundamentalism, and that's, I think, as far as I understand it, that's what we call fundamentalism today. That behavior, that's concrete fundamentalism.
Can you give an example?
Yeah, concrete fundamentalism is what we see in people who take a stance on a particular view, and this view is correct, so therefore everything else has to be incorrect. Given, like, the political climate today, it's You can't agree with a candidate from another party, even if you like some of their policy. They're all good or they're all bad.
Kind of like the Sith thinking in
Yeah,
good
yeah, sure. And you say,
black or white, right?
well, the yeah,
But what's interesting, Todd, is what I love about this nugget is I how does being present and in the now keep us, or why would that help us to avoid or uh, concrete fundamentalism? I think that's very interesting
my
to make that
opinion,
connection.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. So my opinion is because it helps me be aware that I'm not right all the time. And in fact, I'm not right most of the time.
being present.
Yeah, because I'm always learning. I'm always learning new things or trying to glean new things. And if I'm if I'm gaining new knowledge and proving that like a previous view was incorrect,
Oh,
then I can't be fundamental about that.
because to some degree, being present requires you to let go of control.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, and preconceived notions. So I think there's steps that most people experience. Like you're when you're going to start high school and it's the most exciting thing that you've got as a 15 or 16-year old, or you're really nervous about it, like you have all these preconceived notions about how it's play out, and then you get into it and typically it's different. And it's the same thing um, if you get married, your view of marriage or your ideas of marriage, it typically plays out differently from what you thought before. When you become a parent, if you become a parent, like your views of child rearing and nurturing are different than before. And so like if you're have a fundamentalist view that like your way is always right, or you're doing this the best way and you can't challenge that, like I feel like that affects your ability to grow or your view of how the world operates. And you're, in my opinion, you're shortchanging yourself from this whole human experience.
Yeah, I think I might name this episode "Concrete
No,
Fundamentalism."
that'd be
I
great.
mean, I never have thought about how because I've loved studying presentism, and the now, and the enlightenment now, and um, you know, who's the philosopher who talks about that? Eckhart Tolle, and others, Oprah Winfrey, for all that matters. Um, but I've always, I've thought about being present as, just it makes me think about surfing, right? If you really want to learn how to surf, you have to let go of all the things that you want to control, including the surfboard, and just sit on the board in the ocean and become at one with the ocean. You can't really do that and not be present.
Yeah,
And then feel the energy of the ocean underneath you until you recognize, now it's my wave. I've in tune with this energy, this motion, and now I'm ready to take this wave. And but then to take that further, or to incorporate how being present helps us to avoid extremist thinking or ideologies or concrete fundamentalism, I think is really profound. And I just think that that's really cool to think about and to discuss.
yeah, I like your surfing uh, analogy, and I think it's true. You can't make your own wave on the board.
No,
You're going to have to react to what's coming and
be part of it.
be part of it. Like you're along for the ride, make the best of what you can. And you're not
Yeah.
always, you're definitely not always going to ride the right wave, right? Timing matters so much.
And the ocean's bigger than you,
Ocean's
right?
bigger than you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I like that analogy. I'll have to use that in the future. You take the concrete fundamentalism,
All right.
and then I'll take the surfing.
Well, and learning how to surf, that is one thing. Like, you're right, timing is everything. But the truth is, the more in tune you get with the literal energy that's happening in that wave, because you begin to realize the pattern when the ocean's swelling and building your wave, that okay, that feeling tells me that this next motion is going to result in the wave that I can actually drop into, the face that I can drop into. And but that it requires everything else out of your mind in order to just fully connect to that energy of the ocean that's with underneath you. But when I think about bridging the divide and this discussion we're having, I love the concept that one of the ways to bridge the divide is to be present. Is that what we're saying?
Yes.
Let's explore that a little bit more. How does being present help bridge the divide?
I think, well, from like the way that I operate, it doesn't mean that I don't like it. It does, like, an aversion doesn't mean that, like, I don't explore it, right? Or it doesn't mean that I'm not friendly to those who might follow, like, or might be adherents of concrete fundamentalism. Like, I think it's a very healthy thing to be exposed to this kind of wide berth of ideals. So I think it's helpful to, you can act as the bridge to the divide if you understand what their views are on opposite sides of the spectrum, or people who might not have the same ideals as you. And you think about, and you kind of ruminate on, or you let these ideas marinate, and you see, like, what speaks truth to you and your core, and you feel, well, why is this opinion right, or why is this opinion wrong, and kind of challenge yourself on that. And I feel like that helps you determine the direction you want to go and understand. But it also does, you don't need to be mean or a jerk to people who you disagree with either.
Yeah, because being present, when I think about that, like right now, being present for me includes what's happening right now. The only thing I have is the time that is given me. And right now, that's basically this conversation with you. That's what exists right now. And I'm, sitting in my son's room in a rocking chair, and I see a lamp, right? Those are the things that exist. And in order for me to truly be present, I believe I have to suspend judgment, so that as I'm listening to you authentically, I've suspended all judgment about anything that you may say or not say. And that allows me to, through being present, really, I guess, authentically and genuinely understand where you're coming from. It doesn't mean I agree with anything, or it might mean I agree with everything, but I can see what you're saying, where if you're talking to someone who is kind of an extremist in their thinking, it's it's easy to be listening to them, but the whole time you're getting your hackles up and offended and want to attack or opine back, versus being present, which requires suspension of all the things that you think you're in control of,
Yeah.
including your opinion.
Yeah. Well said. I agree. And I think it's very applicable towards many of the lanes or the channels we have in our life. Some of the best leadership advice to me that I've heard is, the most important person is the person who's in front of you, like, at that time.
Yeah.
and which I feel like isn't a natural thing. There's many times I'll be on my computer and someone steps up to my desk, and I'll just say like, "Hey, what's up?" And I don't give my eye contact, or like I'll give my eye contact, but I'll keep my fingers on the keyboard. Like I'm not giving this person. I'm not telling them that they're the most important person right now, and they should be. Uh, I think that's great leadership advice, is to make sure the person in front of you that they're the most important person.
It reminds me of a conversation I had, with my father-in-law, who has a tendency to uh, center around or to focus on concrete fundamentalism and extremist ideas. And I find myself, there was some type of a Black Lives Matter conversation he and I were having, and some of that concrete fundamentalism was coming out from him. And I find myself, not really listening to him or trying to understand him at all. I find myself getting ready to counter him and correct him. And so, what do you think about that? Because I think that for me, you and I talked about this before with you know complete historical denialism, where, well, any kind of racial injustice happened so long ago, we really don't need to worry about it anymore, versus, you know kind of feeling a need to be an activist and speaking up when someone is, uh, kind of doubling down on their fundamentalist ideas. um, what are your thoughts about how to kind of bridge that divide so as to understand where they're coming from, not demonize them, but also not feel like you are compromising what
Yeah,
or feel?
yeah, it can be definitely it can really be a delicate situation. I think there's several schools of thought here. Um, the first one that pops in my mind is I feel like there's times where it's just not helpful to engage or further the conversation,
Oh, that is so true.
right? It's because regardless of your stance, regardless of your opinion, how true or like let's say how objectively truth it is, with as limited bias as possible. Like if it's like a core truth, uh, it's still not gonna, I don't know, win the argument. Maybe that's a bad way to phrase it, but it's not gonna.
It's not going to dissuade him.
Yeah, it's not gonna
Not.
dissuade.
Yep.
So uh, personally, I've learned that it's best for me to just not engage, because I end up losing uh, twice over. I lose because I don't feel that I was like I I don't feel like I was able to be persuasive, and I think but persuasion is a good thing in almost all conversations. And then I feel like not only was I not able to be persuasive, but I feel like personally attacked, or I feel personally demonized for having an opinion. So that's one school of thought that I have is not engaging. Another school of thought is to I saw, yeah, I think I can give this through an example. Is
Yeah.
is Was having a conversation regarding theology recently, and orthodoxy versus unorthodoxy, and where's the role that it plays, and how how do you kind of bridge that divide, one versus the other, because it can get pretty muddled, right? In thinking right versus wrong. And I think that we should not be afraid in safe situations where we can absolutely disagree. And I think it's a very healthy thing to state an opinion or state a belief that you have, and you don't have to back away just because it gets uncomfortable, or you don't have to. feel like you change your position for the sake of a conversation. I think that hurts with authenticity. Um, I think you should evolve. You should always grow, and that might mean that you change your view on areas of life and your outlook. Um, but you shouldn't have to change your position mid argument for the sake of feeling like pressure, for the sake of feeling uncomfortable. I think that's a really important thing to experience some discomfort.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. That it's okay to feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
In fact, it's healthy to feel uncomfortable and be, kind of challenged on your belief system. And um,
Yeah, I agree. And I think personally, for my story on this, and it ties a little bit back to having like uh, like a family line, like a grandmother from Scotland and a grandfather from Australia, right? And um, I don't want to say un-American or not American. That sounds really derogatory. But also, I was born in Japan, and I lived in Japan for the first 5 years of my life, and we were the only white. Like my family was the only white family. Like we're the only, maybe not white family. We were the only non. I feel like we were probably the only non-native Japanese in this small city in southern Japan in the 80s. And all my siblings and we all went to Japanese school. We had a very Japanese way of life. We spoke Japanese, and we spoke English in the house, and that was all I knew. And so when I moved away from Japan, I had a little bit of a culture shock. Like my siblings were put into an ESL program when we moved to America, and I feel like having that experience, having that exposure, uh, has been a real huge positive for me as I continue to grow and to learn, to understand like, oh yeah, there's a lot of different schools of thought, and there's a lot of different people, and then kind of take that with my travels, that I had in my early 20s. I feel like it's really helped expand my mind and expand my understanding of like the schools of thought and human behavior and how we all get along. I mean, I think it's commendable that humans have been around for so long and done all that we have throughout the course of history, uh, because it's going way back to the earlier conversation. Like, there's always been something to be divisive about, right?
yeah, yeah. I think that what also is profound about this conversation, and I haven't actually thought about it until we've talked, is and it might negate the need for more episodes because I think I think I had a hard time hearing it at the beginning of the episode when you said, you know, divisiveness in part is a result of us looking for it or focusing on it, or
Yeah. You're looking for the problems, or you're trying to validate that your opinion is always better.
and that just gets and but as we talked through this episode, I've realized that that's part of, I think, my own challenge, is that I've wanted to help people understand that what I'm right about, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that only highlights the divide. It doesn't do anything but emphasize it.
Yeah. Well, there's a psychologist who wrote a statement, and this is uh, when I heard this, I wrote a book, and one of the most profound statements that I heard or read from this, I think that's maybe I refer to most, kind of like out of all the snippets that you hear, all the quotes that you hear, maybe this is the most common theme that I refer to, which is um, in a situation when you can choose to be right or when you can choose to be helpful, you should always choose to be helpful.
Amen. I've one of the things that I've talked about it in leadership before is it's more important. Relationships are more important than being right.
Yeah, for sure.
So just for our listeners, I think it's interesting for them to know about some of this background you have. So your grandmother in Scotland and your grandfather in Australia, they are the parents of your mom or your
Correct.
dad? They're the
My
okay.
mother.
Your mother and your father, his background?
My father's background is American, family from Kansas, moved to Idaho to be farmers.
Okay, so they're more, yeah, they're I guess American.
They're
Yeah.
Americans. Yep.
And so your dad an American, your mom an Australian.
Yes.
Australian Scottish. Because sometimes I don't know if the time that I've known you, sometimes I've thought he does have a little accent, but I don't know if it's true.
I mean, if accent equals sophistication, I sure hope that you think I have an accent.
You don't sound like you are from Utah. I'll say
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
Or St. George, for that matter.
yeah. Maybe I'm not a. This is my adopted home.
Do you still speak Japanese?
I do. I sound like a Yank when I do it, though. I feel like I'm.
Let's hear a little.
Oh,
Is that weird? My kids speak Chinese, and I put them on the spot, and they're like, "What do you want? What do you want me to say?"
yeah.
Like
Right.
they're performing. Yeah. So I'm sorry
That's
if
right.
that's
Usually,
awkward.
what I'll say is people will say, like, "Hey, do you speak Japanese?" I'll say, "Yeah, I speak a little." They're like, "What do you?" Well, speak some. So I'll usually say like Suzuki, Honda, Mitsubishi. They're like, "Wow." So I'd say like, "Konban wa minasan, watashi no namae wa Todo desu." I know.
Now, do you like Japanese food? Or are you picky about Japanese restaurants when they say they're Japanese or sushi? Is
No,
this is an ignorant question, isn't it?
yeah, no, it's not ignorant at all. It's a question of
It's a
preference.
redneck question.
Yeah. um, I don't like seafood. I know it's a
You
little.
don't like
I don't
seafood.
like seafood. So
What?
I know. I know. I'm glad you were sitting down when I said that.
Well, yes.
So interesting experience in Japan. Um, and as an adult, I spent time in Japan. I went back and I went on a LDS mission to Japan and had been
So for
back.
our listeners who might not know, that's the Mormon Church.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, went on a Mormon mission um, to Tokyo. I was in downtown Tokyo. So I'll go on a tangent a little bit here. It was a really
Please.
different experience. I've to a lot of friends that I have who've never been to Asia, like
So Todd, I
we
have to
tend
just
to.
ask a question, but I'm sorry to
Yeah, go ahead.
interrupt. This is kind of important for maybe some of the listeners. So you grew up part of your life in Japan, and then the church sends you back to Japan on a mission.
That's right. Yeah, I don't
And
get it. I don't choose where I go. You fill out an application, and on the application, there's one question that says, "How comfortable are you learning a foreign language?" And
you knew
I
Japanese.
knew Japanese, so
Got it.
I think from the church's perspective, they're like, "Oh man, this guy already knows Japanese. He already lived in Japan. Like, let's send him there because it is on the spectrum of languages. Granted, I speak English and I can get by on Japanese. It's very different from a lot of the Germanic languages: Italian, Spanish, French,
Sure.
German, things of
Do
that
you
nature.
consider yourself English as a second language?
I did probably up until 9 or 10, and then
Okay.
at that stage of life, English was like right. We hit that midpoint, and then English was far better than Japanese. And today, I can understand. It's a little bizarre. I can understand Japanese far better than I can speak it. So if I can have a conversation with someone, they can speak Japanese to me, and if I can respond in English in my broken Japanese, then we can continue a conversation.
Got it. Okay, so back to your story. Sorry for the segue.
No worries.
Or whatever that was.
So this is about
tangent.
This is the story about seafood and sushi, especially. So I grew up in southern Japan in the farm fields out in the country. So I don't know, it might be the equivalent of saying like I grew up in the in the Smoky Mountains of Tennessee. Kind of like you're really out in the country. That's where I grew up in Japan. And then as a adult, as a missionary, I was in Tokyo, downtown, concrete jungle, and as a child, you eat whatever's given to you, right? Like you're not preparing your food, whatever.
And the public restrooms have bidets.
Yes.
That's important to me.
Yeah.
Okay,
America's behind the times here.
Yes, for sure. Sorry, go ahead.
And so, as an adult, as a missionary, you're assigned another missionary to be with all the time, a companion, and every companion I had, like, they're way stoked on eating sushi all the time, all they could. And I'm not a big fan of seafood. So I found the best way for me to adapt was I just tell everyone that I was vegetarian, because it's difficult when you tell someone that you don't like sushi. They look at you like you have a disease. Like, well, what's wrong with you? like
you're stupid.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
this is great. So then I'd say, no, I'm vegetarian, and that would end the conversation. That was a social engineering trick that I learned.
I love that. But you're not vegetarian.
No, I'm not. Not now.
Yeah. So let's see. What I was going to also ask you about Japan. You are going to put your children into dual immersion programs.
Yes, correct. So
explain that a little.
Yeah. So in my household, we've got we're all mutts. So my wife, her mother is also an immigrant. Her mother is from South America. Her mother's from Uruguay. So our kids are pretty mixed, and she speaks Spanish. I speak.
So her mother's an immigrant.
Yep.
And was your wife born in, like, is she what do you call, is she a naturalized citizen? Is that how that works? Or
she's not a natural. She was born in America. So my wife's born in America. So we just consider her like Hispanic. She's half Uruguayan.
So okay.
She's half. So we wanted our kids, there's a lot of Spanish spoken in her household, and growing up, I had this immersive experience. So we both like the idea of having our children focus on a second language, and we feel like it's a fun development exercise, and like challenges the brain, challenges you to think in different ways. And there's an opportunity locally for a Chinese English dual immersion elementary school program. So we have a child who's starting elementary school, and we applied, and he got accepted into this dual Chinese English program. And you know all about this, having experienced it yourself.
Yeah.
Your children start out the day, and they're spending half the day in Chinese only lecture, and they're learning math in Chinese, they're learning grammar in Chinese, science in Chinese. And so it's public school, so it's the state curriculum, but it's taught in Chinese. And then the other half of the day is English. And having just recently started the school year, my child came home from school, and I said, "How was your day?" And the response is, "Well, my teacher only speaks Chinese, so it's a little hard to understand her."
Oh, now so just so our listeners know, your son and my daughter are in the same Chinese immersion school. that just happened to work out.
Yeah.
It's not because we lived close to each other necessarily, but it's just happened to work out that way. Do you know? I think that they do have the same Chinese teacher.
They have the same Chinese teacher, but I don't know if they're in the same class because it's flip-flopped half day.
Oh, yeah, it is. But I think she has. Well, I don't know because I asked her if she knew it's Quinn, right?
Yes.
And she's like, "Yeah, I really like him." And I'm like, I don't know. She's funny.
Well, good. Well,
So here's another question. So we're gonna wrap up, but I think it's just another interesting kind of. Well, I'm more than anything, I'm interested in your band. You were the lead guitarist,
yeah, correct.
and what music did you write your own, or were you a cover band? Maybe you just give us some fun stuff about that.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we had a lot of fun. We thought we were rock and roll, but the reality is we were a lot more pop. And
Oh,
uh, we all had long hair. We thought we were cooler than we were, but we had a lot of fun. So friends and I,
now what age are you at this
we
point?
were 19 to 23 in between that.
Okay,
In between there.
early 20s. Okay.
Yep. Yeah, and we just got together. There was a strong local scene and a strong scene in Utah and a strong scene in Las Vegas that at the time. So right around this time, you remember the game Rock Band that came out
Yes.
for the Wii or for the PlayStation or Xbox, and that gave a lot of value to small local indie bands because now like playing instruments was really cool, and I feel like we benefited from that because people would go and play Rock Band and then they'd want to come see it like a show, and we go and we'd play shows. And
Now, is there a local scene in St. George?
now not so much. There's a few friends that I have who play as a hobby, and there's not like no dedicated venues, um, limited offerings. There's a few
But,
bars you can play at.
but we're close to Vegas.
We're close to Las Vegas, and Las Vegas is still strong opportunity for bands who are up and coming who are trying to do it, trying to make it.
So the kind of music
Yeah,
when you
so
say
we played
yeah,
we played rock, pop rock, original music,
all original.
all original. We definitely throw in a few cover songs.
So maybe outline some of the bands that have inspired your band or
Yeah,
inspired you.
I'd say my favorite band is a band called Thrice. They're a Southern California band, kind of came out through the early 2000s. If you're not a Thrice fan, I highly recommend you listen to the music.
I have never. I mean, I've. This is such a fascinating conversation because there's so many things I'm learning. I feel like I'm pretty up on music, but I've not heard of Thrice. So I'm gonna look it up.
Your horizon's about to be expanded when you
Okay,
listen to
well,
the
text me your
discography.
favorite Thrice song.
Oh, my favorite Thrice songs. If you want like solid rock, it's The Earth Will Shake. If you want um, just an all around easy listening good song, it's called Words in the Water. Um, Another really good rock song is called Fire Breather. Yeah,
Wow,
those are
cool.
probably my top three. And then
Okay, so Thrice. What
Thrice.
other inspiration?
Thrice was really really big. Um, there's a lot of pop punk bands at the time, like Fall Out Boy and Yellow Card. Those
Yeah,
were
I was a big Yellow Card fan. Yeah.
they were really like leading the scene at the time, and try to make music to match that genre.
What was the name of your band?
Kennedy.
Who was in it with you?
Aaron Meadows was a singer. Drew Adams was our bassist. Kyle Fisher and Max Miller They were both fellow guitarists.
What years would have like what this
This
was
was
nine?
2000. This would have been 2000. When did we start playing? 2004 till 2007. So 4, 5, 6, 7.
Then did you play in St. George?
Yeah. We played in St. George frequently.
I feel like I've was listened to that at one point. I'll have to. And what high school did you go to again?
Dixie.
But these
Yeah.
wouldn't have been. Were these people from Dixie?
Oh no, I was the only one from Dixie.
Huh. And do you have any of your work that you can share?
Yeah,
We could play
of course,
on the podcast. Okay.
for sure.
Well, I think that, so to summarize, what I love about this episode is I did not expect that the power of now and presentism would be a bridge that we can use for the divide. And thank you, Todd, for taking some time
You're welcome.
and bringing your insight.
1, 2, 3, 4.